The ongoing civil lawsuits against rapper and music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, as well as recording labels and music industry executives, are bringing a different kind of legal battle to light. Lawyer versus lawyer. Hundreds of pages of filings between the attorney for Little Rod Jones and the attorney for some of the defendants has just been released, and we're going to break down what's going on. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, before we even get started talking about Sean Diddy Combs, I got to tell you something else. I went to CrimeCon this past weekend in Nashville, Tennessee. Me and Jeanette Levy, our whole Law&Crime team. And I got to tell you, you know what was amazing? More than anything, because it's a great experience. But you know what was really amazing? Getting a chance to meet you. So many of you out there who watch us here on Sidebar, who listen to us, you came over to us. And you were so kind and complimentary of the work our team does here on Sidebar. And I just have to say again, thank you. Thank you for watching us. Thank you for trusting us. We will make sure to keep providing this content for you. And again, I can't wait for the next one to meet all of you in person. Okay, so now with that, let's talk about Sean Diddy Combs. It has been months since Combs' homes were raided by federal agents, his name appearing in multiple high-profile lawsuits. We covered so much of this here on Sidebar. And while there certainly has been drama along the way, now we are seeing something else play out. The attorney for several of the plaintiffs in these Combs lawsuits is fighting back, and it is something to see. And I'm going to tell you big picture why it all matters. But first, for anyone who's been following this name will sound very familiar. Tyrone Blackburn. We have talked a lot about him. And as I said, he represents some of the people who have been suing Sean Combs. And he is very, very interesting, not only because he's spearheading a lot of this litigation against the music mogul, but because his lawsuits include very pointed, colorful language. For example, in one lawsuit from a woman named Grace O'Markey, who claims that Combs' son Christian assaulted her when she was working as a steward on a private yacht, Blackburn wrote in this filing, quote, "Defendant C. Combs is a 25-year-old auto-tuned and heavily edited rapper. Unfortunately, as the saying has it, the apple does not fall far from the tree. Defendant Sean Combs, who has also been accused of several acts of sexual assault, rape, sexual violence, and drugging, among other deplorable conduct, is the father of defendant C. Combs, who is seemingly taken after his father and the family business of reckless partying, drugging others, sexual violence, and other illegal conduct." Yeah, so you can see he kind of has a certain dramatic flair to his filings. But Mr. Blackburn has also come into the spotlight a bit for other reasons. You see, not only has he been criticized by opposing counsel, which we're going to get into, but a federal judge referred him to the Grievance Committee in New York. United States District Court Judge for the Southern District of New York, Denise Coate, submitted a referral to the New York Federal Court Grievance Committee claiming that there were issues with Blackburn in 5 cases. She wrote in one of these filings, quote, "A reasonable inference from Blackburn's pattern of behavior is that he improperly files cases in federal court to garner media attention, embarrass defendants with salacious allegations, and pressure defendants to settle quickly." Well, with all of that, now Tyrone Blackburn is fighting back. Not necessarily with the judge. He claims he already issued a response regarding that issue. But what we're talking about now is more specifically with respect to Sean Combs, because he is fighting back against the defendants in one of these lawsuits from filing sanctions against him. Let me explain. So Tyrone Blackburn represents Rodney Little Rod Jones, who sued Combs, Combs-affiliated companies, and others, including actor Cuba Gooding Jr. Jones alleges sexual assault, harassment, sex trafficking. As part of the lawsuit, Jones was suing Motown Records, Universal Music Group, UMG, and Lucian Grange, the CEO of UMG. Collectively, they're known as the UMG defendants. We're going to be saying that a lot. Now, interestingly, these defendants, or the attorney who represents these defendants, in a filing wrote, quote, "Plaintiff had also named Universal Music Group as a defendant, but there is no such juridical entity. Universal Music Group is an umbrella name commonly used to refer to all of the various companies and record labels that are encompassed within UMG Recordings, Inc. I therefore assume that plaintiff has misnamed Universal Music Group, intending to actually name UMG Recordings, Inc., and I will refer to Universal Music Group herein as UMG Recordings, Inc. Okay, so would not be great if you get the name wrong of one of the defendants, but putting that aside, with that, Jones alleges that all of these entities are liable for the abuse that he suffered at the hands of Sean Combs. The idea is that all of these defendants are part of this illegal criminal enterprise in violation of RICO or racketeering law, making money by forcing and threatening people like Jones to transport drugs and guns, solicit minors and sex workers, and make music without properly paying individuals like Jones. That these UMG defendants and other affiliated companies should have been monitoring or warning or supervising what Combs and his associates were allegedly doing, but instead they just wanted to enrich themselves. Now, Jones, despite all of that, through Blackburn, ultimately decided to drop the case against the UMG defendants. And that's the issue. Based upon new filings from Mr. Blackburn, it seems that there was an agreement here between him and opposing counsel to drop the claims against these specific defendants as long as defense counsel didn't file a sanctions motion against him and Mr. Jones. And this is where it gets very thorny. Again, I'm going to explain why this is all important in the grand scheme. But Mr. Blackburn just filed a declaration with the court where he explains what's going on. And a declaration is basically a statement you make under penalty of perjury. So, yeah, don't lie. Now, in his own declaration, Blackburn wrote, quote, "On May 10th, 2024, I emailed Donald Zakarin, counsel for the UMG defendants, to inform him of the plaintiff's decision to dismiss the case against them. I sent Zakarin my proposed notice of dismissal. Zakarin insisted on drafting a completely different notice of voluntary dismissal and declaration. I filed the document prepared by Zakarin as an extension of good faith." Now, when you read this document, it seems that Blackburn is agreeing that there is no legal or factual basis for the allegations against these UMG defendants. Wow. Why? Well, Blackburn explains in his declaration that his team had spent extensive time researching and investigating the validity of Sean Combs' signature on this agreement between Love Records, Combs, and Motown. He says that they pulled over 40 examples of Combs' signature from agreements. We even secured the services of a handwriting expert who confirmed our suspicions that Combs did not sign the agreement with Motown. As a result, Plaintiff Jones felt that Motown and the UMG defendants were more than likely victims of fraud perpetrated by Combs, and it would be impossible to hold them equally liable for the harm Combs visited upon Mr. Jones. So here, Blackburn appears to be saying, we did more research into this connection between the record labels and Combs and found that they might actually be victims of a larger scheme by Combs, and maybe they shouldn't be on the hook for what Combs allegedly did. I think it would also be a question of if you present that at trial, perhaps a jury would find these defendants sympathetic, and they might and Jones might actually lose. So Blackburn says we discovered all this. Now he says before we discovered all this, Mr. Zakarin had filed a notice that he'd be asking for sanctions against me, Mr. Blackburn, and my client, Mr. Jones. And that is a big deal. When we talk about sanctions, we're talking about monetary penalties for some egregious behavior. Here, Zakarin is asking for sanctions pursuant to Rule 11 under the federal rules, which basically says you can't file a pleading or a motion or a paper for an improper purpose. You need to have some basis in support for what you're alleging, basis in law and fact. You can't file frivolous claims or arguments. And that makes sense, right? You can't use the legal system as an unfair weapon. So Zakarin is claiming that Mr. Blackburn made a lot of wild accusations in Jones' lawsuits that weren't necessarily supported by facts or evidence. And this complaint was filed purely to harass and defame the defendants and to garner media attention for Jones. And this motion that was asking for sanctions against Blackburn and Jones included a sworn declaration from Zakarin. And one of the things he says is, quote, I sought at the very outset of this case on March 4th, 2024, to explain to Mr. Blackburn that his allegations against UMG were factually baseless and that there was also no legal merit to the claims. Had he conducted a proper examination of the facts and the law, he could not have filed the FAC, First Amended Complaint, which would have spared my clients the hundreds of thousands of dollars in unnecessary legal fees and expenses that this action has now cost them. In one of the filings, Zakarin explains, you claim that Sir Lucian Grange and Miss Habtemariam, that's Ethiopia Habtemariam, the former chairwoman and CEO of Motown, visited Combs' homes in Los Angeles and Miami in the evenings, and both would disappear for hours in Mr. Combs' bedrooms. Aside from the absurd oddity of the identical alleged behavior by two individuals separately on apparently separate occasions, the entire story about their attendance at any events at Mr. Combs' homes or any listening parties is completely fabricated. Sir Lucian Grange has never been to Mr. Combs' homes in L.A. or Miami and never attended or sponsored any listening parties at any of Mr. Combs' homes and was not present at any writers' camps. Thus, everything alleged about both Sir Lucian Grange's supposed knowledge of illicit and illegal activities engaged in by Mr. Combs and others are categorically false. And there are hundreds and hundreds of pages in these memo filings, but it kind of gives you an idea of the accusations against Blackburn and Jones, but especially Mr. Blackburn, right? And there are also sworn declarations from a few of the defendants I mentioned, including Miss Habtemariam and Mr. Grange, and we're going to give you a sample of those. So in her statement, Habtemariam says, being falsely accused of criminal conduct is deeply upsetting to me. I did no wrong. I never saw or participated in any alleged racketeering enterprise, and I never saw, aided, or abetted or tried to conceal any sex trafficking activity. And Habtemariam claims that Blackburn offered to drop her from the lawsuit if she signed a declaration, but she says the narrative that he provided in that was completely false, so she refused to sign it. Lucian Grange provided a similar sworn statement, and right off the bat, he pointed out something very important. As the second amended complaint admits, I am a resident of California, not New York. As I will detail below, I engaged in no activity in New York whatsoever with respect to this matter. So that would essentially mean that there's a jurisdiction issue. He shouldn't be a part of a New York lawsuit. And he also says that, quote, none of these allegations are supported by a single fact. Okay, so now you know what the sanctions are all about. We now have to talk about Monday, because on Monday, Mr. Blackburn fired back at Zakarin in his own hundreds of pages. Even the exhibits have exhibits. So again, we're going to give you an overview. So Blackburn, in his declaration, says, look, we received this email from opposing counsel back on April 26, 2024. That email, by the way, is included in these filings. And in that email from opposing counsel to Blackburn, it says, quote, you have 21 days to withdraw all claims asserted against the UMG defendants with prejudice, meaning you can't refile the claims. Your failure to do so will result in the filing of this motion with the court. So that's what, May 17th, 2024. Blackburn says, we did that. We filed the documents. We dismissed the claims. We thought we were in the clear. But Blackburn says Zakarin double-crossed us by filing a revamped version of the Rule 11 sanctions motion anyway. Blackburn uses words like unethical gamemanship, double-crossed, disguised, all to describe this alleged move by Zakarin. He makes the claim that Zakarin tried to disguise this as a motion under a different statute, but it's basically the same thing. Which, by the way, is maybe not that surprising that Zakarin did this, because in an email to Blackburn, Zakarin wrote, you seem to believe that having filed 3 separate complaints over the past 2 months, each of which is filled with offensively false accusations of criminal conduct that you either knew were completely false or as to which you were completely indifferent to whether they were true or false, you can skate away unscathed by your conduct simply by proposing terms on which you would dismiss the current version of the complaint with prejudice. You appear indifferent to the harm you and your client have caused to completely innocent people and companies. But Blackburn goes back to say, we agreed to dismiss the claim so you wouldn't try to sanction us. And Blackburn states, look, I honestly should have known better than to believe that Zakarin would act with integrity. Blackburn then goes on to defend himself, saying he didn't act in bad faith when he filed this lawsuit against the UMG defendants, that this lawsuit was instituted because the UMG defendants knowingly conducted business with Combs, whom they knew or should have known was a violent, deceptive, morally flawed individual. He says this lawsuit was not instituted for some improper purpose, but rather for the very legitimate purpose of recovering damages for the UMG defendants' reckless, self-serving decision to enter a partnership with Combs to develop Love Records. He says that what he was doing was based on a reasonable investigation. He claims he spoke with witnesses, that Mr. Jones had corroborating evidence like text messages, video recordings, and it really should be no surprise that these defendants were added to this lawsuit given what Blackburn says is Combs' notorious history, that he's facing 8 lawsuits accusing him of rape and sex trafficking. And Blackburn actually doubles down on this, and he's like, you know what? Every claim that plaintiff Jones has raised has turned out to be true. Jones alleged that Brendan Paul, Combs' associate, was his drug mule, and guess what? Paul gets arrested on March 25th on drug charges. Jones says that Combs is a sex trafficker, and then the raids happen. Blackburn says all of this is really about the fact that the UMG defendants want to separate themselves as much from Combs, but this is their own fault. In fact, he uses this language. Remember I talked about colorful language? Before November 16th, 2023, that was the date when Cassandra Ventura filed her lawsuit against Sean Combs. This is his ex-girlfriend. Defendants were willing to crawl over hot coals to touch the hem of Combs' garment. Yeah, you can see that there's really no love lost between these attorneys. And in fact, there's a lot of email correspondence between Blackburn and Zakarian, and it gets kind of juicy. I mean, in an email dated on April 11th, Blackburn writes, "Donald, you can attack my character all you want, but your client has unclean hands. I've spoken to many recently former UMG employees, some of whom were close to your beloved Lucian. I also know for a fact that your client has engaged in questionable and unethical business practices for years, if not decades. I will not put all I know in this email, but I do know that you, sir, are doing your client a huge disservice." Now, in terms of Zakarian, one of the things that he has accused Blackburn of was not answering his phone and seemingly disappearing. In one of his replies, Zakarian says, "Your problem in responding is not due to a lack of information or knowledge on your part, but due to the fact that you filed knowingly false complaints without any factual or legal basis, and your desperate effort to manufacture some way to avoid dismissal and Rule 11 sanctions will be quite obvious to the judge when you seek further time and discovery. Oh, and you should be aware that a frivolous motion for sanctions is itself sanctionable. Mr. Blackburn, the first rule of self-preservation is when you're in a hole of your own creation, stop digging. You obviously have not yet learned that lesson. You're going to find it a painful lesson here, but you have earned that pain." Wow. Heated. It's like they should wrestle one another. My gosh. But again, this is kind of a summary of some back and forth, but I'm going to tell you now why this matters. I'm going to give you the big picture. Why do we care about this? Why do we care about Tyrone Blackbird? I'm going to tell you why. This all goes to one thing and one thing only: credibility. The credibility of these accusations, the strength of these claims is what Rodney Jones and other plaintiffs being represented by Blackburn saying, is it true? Yes, Sean Combs is facing multiple lawsuits. Yes, the feds raided his homes, and there appears to be an ongoing federal investigation that could possibly result in criminal charges. But Combs hasn't been charged. He hasn't been found liable in court yet. Reporting indicates that authorities may still be gathering information in this case, so they might not have it ready to actually present for an indictment. Now, I should tell you, if this is true, it does confirm what we've been saying, that investigators have probably been talking with a number of people, including possible Combs accusers. That's why we didn't see arrests on the day of the raids, and we didn't see arrests immediately. It takes time to build these kinds of cases. And again, we do not know what role Combs may be playing in this investigation. But investigators, they have to analyze what was taken from those properties during those raids. They have to interview people. They have to verify the information from witnesses. So this takes time. Okay, so with all of that as background, now let's talk some recent updates. And the first update we want to talk about concerns Kim Porter. This is the late ex-girlfriend of Sean Combs. And we talked a lot about Kim Porter on a previous Sidebar, but she and Combs, they had an on-again, off-again relationship that started in the 90s. It picked back up in the early 2000s. They have 3 biological children together, but Combs has actually raised one of Kim Porter's children that she had with another individual. One of their biological children is Christian Combs, who is actually named in one of these lawsuits. He has been sued for sexual assault by a former steward on a yacht that Sean Combs apparently chartered. We also covered that in another Sidebar. Now, sadly, Porter died in 2018 from what authorities concluded was lobar pneumonia. Her name actually came up relatively recently in a new lawsuit that was filed by another Combs accuser, April Lampros. One of her allegations is that Combs forced her and Porter to take drugs and have sex with each other in front of Combs, and that Porter led to her being fired from her job. Now, while that case works its way through the courts, we want to talk now about a different update, and it concerns Porter's father, 78-year-old Jake Porter. He spoke out to Rolling Stone about Combs, broke his silence, and more specifically, he talked about that horrifying video published by CNN, the video purportedly from 2016 allegedly showing Combs in just a towel savagely beating and dragging his ex-girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura, in an elevator bank at the Intercontinental Hotel in LA. Horrible video, taken from surveillance footage. It's a video that is incredibly disturbing and hard to see. So Jake Porter told Rolling Stone, quote, "You can say I was disgusted with the video and I wouldn't treat my enemy like that. It was despicable. I couldn't believe it. I was in Vietnam and I wouldn't do that to my enemy." Porter explained that while he never witnessed the rapper become violent with his daughter, it now, quote, makes him wonder what may have been going on. Quote, "I didn't know he could stoop that low. I imagine it surprised a lot of people. I wouldn't even do a dog like that. My heart goes out to Cassie." And he added that the reason his daughter and Combs broke up was because even though she loved him, she, quote, just couldn't live with him. "I think he was a very jealous person. They both loved each other. Kim's love was legitimate. Puffy's love, I don't know what he calls love, you know what I mean? I really don't think he has any idea what love is." And by the way, Jake Porter's comments, they echo a number of people who watched that video and were shocked by what they saw. And let's not forget, Cassandra Ventura came out after the release of that video and said, "This is what it takes for people to believe what I was saying." And here's the thing, arguably just as shocking as that video was Combs' apology 2 days later on Instagram.
It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. Sometimes you got to do that. I was f***ed up. I hit rock bottom. But I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. I had to go into therapy, and go into rehab. Had to ask God for His mercy and grace. I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
And we have covered this as well on Sidebar before, but him seemingly admitting that that was him on tape doing this could be very problematic for him, because while it doesn't seem he's going to be hit with state charges since time ran out to bring assault charges in LA, the statute of limitations ran out, there is this ongoing federal probe. Could this not be used as a piece of evidence in a larger sex trafficking case if we're talking about violence or threats of violence to coerce people into commercial sex acts, which, by the way, Cassandra Ventura had alleged in her prior lawsuit against Combs? before she ended up settling with him. But aside from the potential legal consequences, there has been even more fallout for Combs after that video, which brings me to another update. Howard University, the private, historically black university out of Washington, D.C., has revoked its honorary degree it awarded Sean Combs back in 2014. The university's board of trustees released a statement saying, quote, Mr. Combs' behavior as captured in a recently released video is so fundamentally incompatible with Howard University's core values and beliefs that he is deemed no longer worthy to hold the institution's highest honor. This acceptance revokes all honors and privileges associated with the degree. Accordingly, the board has directed that his name be removed from all documents listing honorary degree recipients of Howard University. And by the way, I have to say, if that video that we've been talking about wasn't so clear as it is, I think it's a fair argument to make that Sean Combs may not have even come out and apologized for that. I think that's a fair assessment. But because that video was so clear, you could say, did he have no kind of choice? If it was grainy, is it possible he would have denied it like he's denied the allegations in the past? Would his attorneys have denied it? Would Howard University have revoked this degree? It's an important question. But given how clear that video is, something to think about. But by the way, this just continues the fallout for Combs in the wake of this video, in the wake of the lawsuits, in the wake of the raids. While not providing a reason, America's Best Eyeglasses announced it will no longer carry Sean John. They've pulled the frames from their retail stores and their website. Sean John, of course, is the fashion label created by Combs in the late 90s. The tuition-free charter school co-founded by Combs, Capital Preparatory Harlem, it ended its partnership with him. Hulu had reportedly been working on a reality show about Combs and his 7 children. That project was thrown out back in December. Combs reportedly stepped down as chairman and sold shares of Revolt TV. CNN reported that fitness powerhouse Peloton has removed Combs' music from its platform. And talking about that, back in April, Billboard reported that airplay of Combs' songs was down significantly overall. City of New York reportedly considering taking back the key to the city that was given to Sean Combs in September of last year. So clearly a fall from grace for Sean Diddy Combs. But now we move on to another update. Now, clearly, given the allegations against Combs, there are those who have made comparisons to disgraced R&B singer R. Kelly. R. Kelly was convicted and sentenced to decades behind bars for sex trafficking, racketeering, and child sex crimes. But again, need to emphasize that Combs has not been criminally charged or even found liable with respect to any of these allegations. These are just allegations at this point. However, Dream Hampton, the executive producer of the 2019 doc-series Surviving R. Kelly, she also produced a new documentary called It Was All a Dream that features clips of Sean Combs. Well, she claims that she reached out to Combs after Ventura sued him back in November 2023, that lawsuit alleging sexual assault, sex trafficking, sexual slavery. Remember, that lawsuit is what basically got the ball rolling on everything we're talking about. Well, Hampton apparently wanted Combs to come clean about everything. Quote, I reached out to him because I know that I'm someone that he'll listen to. And I said, Puff, I'm not trying to Olivia Pope you at all. I think that you're done and that it's time to tap out. And while she says, look, I hadn't seen him been violent before, she says that's very natural because men wouldn't beat their partners in front of other people. Hampton claims she followed up with a voice note to Combs. Quote, what you need to do, what we need, what we've needed really since Mike Tyson raped Desiree Washington is one of y'all mother effers to just say, I did this and I'm going to spend the rest of my life, and that includes financial restitution, trying to make this right. She continued, quote, I was like, this is a Sisyphean struggle that women are involved in. The so-called Me Too movement, the rock is coming down. And this whole Johnny Depp, Russell Simmons, deny, that's not even an option for you, Puff. Nobody is going to believe you. You're loathed already. So you actually have an opportunity here to enter into a different paradigm. Very interesting take from Hampton there. From a legal point of view, it's not surprising he didn't admit to anything. Again, these are all allegations, but even if he did do everything, he's trying to fight this in the court of law. So he wouldn't have an advantage to ultimately admit this, especially if he felt that if he admits to one, more lawsuits would come down the pipeline. But anyway, that's the legal point of view. From an ethical, moral point of view, that's a different question. Now, there have been all different kinds of reactions to the Combs saga. And that includes those who have not missed an opportunity to go after Sean Combs. And one of those people is rapper 50 Cent, who has this ongoing feud with Combs. Netflix, by the way, has also acquired apparently a docuseries that has been produced by 50 Cent that's all about Sean Diddy Combs. And he's talked about that before. And he has consistently been commenting on Combs after each one of these developments. So on X, after the raids, 50 Cent wrote, "Now it's not Diddy do it, it's Diddy done. They don't come like that unless they got a case." When the Ventura tape got released and Combs put out that apology, 50 Cent wrote on Instagram, quote, "This is not going to work. Who is advising him right now? SMH bad move." Shaking my head. Well, now 50 Cent apparently appeared at a comedy roast of Sean Combs. This was at the Dead Flamingo pop-up in Miami, Florida. Comics such as Lonnie Cox, Ricky Cruz, Drew Illa, they performed. It was actually designed to raise money for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. The event's host, Brittany Brave, said, quote, that Diddy is topical right now, so it made sense to join the conversation in a productive way. As for 50 Cent, he reportedly didn't get on stage or say anything, but he was there, taking pictures, passing out drinks. He posted this on Instagram, quote, "Yes, I was in attendance. I thought Puffy might show up because I saw Tom Brady at his," and then he has the emoji like shrugging shoulders. "He didn't come. I had the shooters." And then he's got the film emoji. "Get your mind out gutters, videographers." What? So he's seeming to suggest or joke around that he had shooters there ready to go if Combs had showed up, which is interesting because Combs reportedly is in Miami as all of this is going on. There have been photos and videos of him out and about recently, so kind of interesting to think about. All right, let me end this with one more update for you, and this concerns none other than Suge Knight, a very familiar character in Combs' world, a longtime rival, the founder of Death Row Records. Actually, he was mentioned in Cassandra Ventura's lawsuit against Diddy. So in her lawsuit, she says, quote, "Miss Ventura was also exposed to the intense violence that pervaded Mr. Combs' rise to fame. For example, on one occasion when Mr. Combs and Miss Ventura were using drugs together in his home, one of his security staff barged in and announced that Suge Knight, a longtime rival of Mr. Combs, was spotted at Mel's Drive-In Diner in Los Angeles. Mr. Combs began to get dressed, retrieved multiple guns from a safe, and ran out of his home to where he believed Mr. Knight was dining. Miss Ventura became terrified and began to cry." Well, the former record executive currently sits behind bars in a 28-year prison sentence for manslaughter, but that hasn't stopped him from speaking out about Diddy. No, we previously reported how he advised that Diddy should turn himself in, claimed that Diddy's life was in danger, and now he has a very interesting theory about what is going on. So on his podcast, Collect Call with Suge Knight, he does this from prison. He says, quote, "It's a lot of things that people have been knowing, and everybody gets judged differently. It shouldn't be a gray area when it comes to doing something right, doing something positive, or doing something for the community. That being said, naturally, Puffy been an FBI informant forever, as they would say. That's why it's different when it comes to him. Regardless of who gets hurt, all everybody been saying is Puffy, Puffy, Puffy. I think they shouldn't all blame everything on Puffy. His exes in the industry knew about it. Everybody in his crew knew about it. The bees he dates knew about it. Everybody knew about it. So don't push away from it now." So aside from the idea that Diddy is an FBI informant and is maybe getting some sort of protection, Knight does raise a very interesting issue in terms of if these allegations are true, who was involved? Who was complicit? Who knew? Who else could be brought into this, either as a witness or potential defendant? We don't know. But again, no arrests, no charges at the time of this recording.
And you got to remember that the Southern District of New York, right, which is looking into this, is the same office that looked into Peter Nygaard, another huge predator we've investigated. Homeland Security was also involved in R. Kelly. I mean, there's so much evidence here. It seems very unlikely that Diddy is going to escape this one. They've got a lot, and we saw the video. Well, the statute of limitations is run out, but that impacts the aggressiveness of federal agents.
There was something about that video that changed everything.
Oh,
and I think Cassandra Ventura said it. She goes, I wish it didn't take that video for people to believe my story.
It was violent. It was upsetting, predatory. It was just violative in every single way. I mean, to keep on beating viciously this defenseless woman in a hotel, and how he got away with it then, that's the question. I mean, obviously this stuff has been going on for a decade or more. And you can say all you want about the environment of hip hop and rap and record producers and people who are around them know what they sign up for. These are crimes, violent, predatory crimes. And I wonder how it is he got away with it for so long. Intimidation, keeping people quiet and buying them off, I'm sure had a part to it.
Well, in her complaint, there was the allegation that he bought the tape. And what was interesting about it was her accounting of what happened to her in that hallway is almost identical to the video. So it does give credence to what her allegations were.
And why would you not believe her?
Right.
I mean, yes, she reached a settlement in civil court, and you can't blame her for that. But that doesn't hold him immune from criminal prosecution, as you know, being a lawyer yourself.
Right.
It's not going to protect him. And so right now, and based upon everything I'm hearing from federal sources, and I spoke with, people close to the Homeland Security Department just minutes before I sat down with you, there is a very aggressive investigation. They're in no rush because they know where he is. They're going to do this right, and they're going to keep chipping away at it and have a grand jury and have witnesses in front of the grand jury. And I can virtually predict without fear of contradiction, there will be indictments in this case.
They didn't give you a timeline of when that would happen.
No. And that's difficult to get, and grand juries are their own beasts with prosecutors bringing witnesses and evidence in front of them. But he's in trouble. And there's all this talk about, was he a cooperating witness for the FBI or some other?
Well, Suge Knight said that.
I mean, Suge Knight said it, and so you got to consider the source. Although, Suge Knight would know, theoretically, right? And maybe that could explain why he stayed out of trouble for so long. But even if he was, and I can't confirm that he was, or say that he wasn't, that's not going to keep him out of trouble in this case, for sure.
So, I mean, that's the question. A lot of people are wondering, why is it taking so long? Why wasn't he arrested? They had to collect everything from the house. They speak to witnesses. Do you think it's the main accusers in these lawsuits that are going to be the star witnesses of what could be a potential federal case, a federal sex trafficking case against, a potential case against Sean Diddy Combs? So, by the way, he hasn't been charged. He hasn't been arrested. He hasn't been found liable.
I totally think that, and here's why. If you look at these past cases, the civil lawsuits often come before the criminal investigations and the criminal charges. So it would be a derelict of responsibility for Homeland Security to not pay attention to this evidence that comes out there from these civil cases. It would be wrong if they didn't take a look at it. I mean, the evidence is strong, it's compelling, the crimes are offensive, violent, and as I said, predatory. So they have to take a look at it. And I was told earlier on that they kept this so close to the vest, Homeland Security, when they raided Diddy's residences, there were agents on that raid who didn't know whose home they were raiding.
Oh, wow.
That's how tightly held this was. So this has been going on a while, and they've kept it under wraps.
So many things I want to ask you about that. First of all, would you agree that the way they conducted those raids was not abnormal? I mean, given the subject matter and the circumstances?
No, not given the fact that you've got somebody who's talked about weapons, who's by many accounts has weapons around, who's had violent behavior. You don't know who's in there. You don't know what you're going to walk into. So they went in heavy.
Yeah.
And I don't see anything wrong with the way they conducted those raids. I just don't.
And by the way, going back to that video from 2016, I've talked to experts about that. He might not be charged with assault in California, but that could be part of the case that they're building.
Absolutely. And it could be, as you know this better than I do, when you have incidents like that in somebody's past, they can be introduced as evidence in trial for other crimes.
Right.
It's past actions. We saw the whole dust up in the Weinstein case over that very issue, similar acts testimony. So it could very well be used, number one, in the grand jury, and number two, at trial someday.
Yeah, because if you're talking about sex trafficking using force or coercion to force
what
people
more
into
do you need
commercial...
to see than to show somebody's state of mind?
Were you shocked that he issued that apology? Because, first of all, let's be clear. He doesn't issue it years ago.
No.
He doesn't admit to it years ago. He only admits it when the statute of limitations ran. But like we were talking about, he could still be, that video could be used against him. Weren't you shocked that he apologized for it?
I am in two different ways. One, it was a feeble apology.
Right.
And it was more self-serving than anything else. Two, I got to believe he did it without consulting his lawyer first, because any defense lawyer would say, let's hold off on this and figure out what our strategy is going to be. So I'm shocked on two levels.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to apologize, go out and say it. Cassie, I'm sorry, I was a bad human being. This was wrong on every level. But
he denied it for so long. He denied all the allegations, and then this comes out.
The apology gets him nowhere in the court of public opinion, and it hurts him in the court of law.
If that video wasn't so clear, if it was grainy, if you couldn't tell what was going on, I would put Vegas money down that he would not have issued that apology.
I guarantee it was just offensive and shocking on every level, and there's no way around it. And that's why you're seeing the university give back the $1 million. That's why you're seeing these other projects being canceled. He's dead in the water right now. Nobody's going to touch him.
But I do want to be clear about something. Just because that video, he admits to that, it doesn't necessarily make everything else that's being alleged about him true, right? And one of the things that happens is when you're dealing with very high-profile individuals, the lawsuits one after another. And the timing of it, you could say, if one person comes out, the other people feel comfortable finally to be able to go after such an important and powerful individual like him. The other way of looking at it is they could look at it as he is characterized as a cash grab.
People are jumping on the bandwagon.
And what do you take of that?
Well, I think there's always going to be some jumping on the bandwagon, and there will always be opportunists. But I think in this particular situation, the prosecutors are going to have a vast menu of criminal activity from which to pick and put in the indictment.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot there, and they're not going to have trouble picking the most relevant and important crimes to prosecute him with.
We did a sidebar on what the potential charges could look like, whether it was sex trafficking or racketeering or guns charges or narcotics. When I read these lawsuits, though, and one of the reasons I was very excited to talk to you, other than the fact that I love talking to you, this behavior, the idea of forcing people into commercial sex act. These are the allegations. The freak-off sessions. I mean, one of the things from Cassandra Ventura's lawsuit was that he forced her to have sexual relations with men while he watched and pleasured himself. In your experience in your career, is that consistent with other behavior you've seen from people before?
Well, yeah. I mean, we see repeat offenders all the time, and when people get away with certain behavior, they will test it again. We had a guy we caught in a sting in Ohio 18 months ago, right? He was a guy who drove from Indiana. He wanted to have sex with a 13-year-old girl while the father watched, then watched the father have sex with the girl. Now, these were all undercover, detectives and deputies, but we watched it play out on camera. Yesterday, I find out that this same man who's left Indiana, is living in Ohio, was charged again being on the same website trying to ignite a romantic relationship with another underage girl. And so now he's going away forever. He should have gone away forever the first time, but now he's going to go away for a long time. Diddy, once charged, and if in fact he's convicted of these crimes, he could be facing, a long stint in prison.
And these allegations, if you take them in the whole, they're coming back from the 90s.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, how, if this is all true, if he's ultimately charged and ultimately convicted, how did this go on for so long? Who knew about it? Who knew what? I actually believe that a lot of people didn't come forward either because they're cooperating with the government, they're providing information, we're subpoenaed, or they're afraid to come out.
Well, I think this world, some inhabitants of this world, hip hop, rap, or whatever, were able to have this sense of impunity because they could control the people in their circle. They were giving them money, they were intimidating them with power and weapons and drugs and everything else. And I think for a long time there's a sense, well, if I give him up, I'm going to be giving myself up. So I better not say anything because this is kind of how I'm getting my money.
Yeah.
And little by little, this behavior escalates to a point that people are going to say enough is enough. And that's what's happening here.
Yeah, and again, look, these are allegations at this point. I am curious to see if there will be charges and when there will be charges if it ultimately happens. But, you know, you talk about the other people that knew. Christian Combs, his son, has already been facing his own lawsuit for allegedly sexually assaulting a steward on a yacht. And in that lawsuit, the lawyer who filed on behalf of the plaintiff uses very colorful language, but basically said the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And taking everything is true, taking all of it is true. If that's really a situation where his son is engaging in similar behavior, in your experience, do you see that pattern of behavior passed in a family line like that?
I interviewed a predator we caught last week who showed up in our sting, having done 7 years in prison for sexually assaulting his girlfriend's 13-year-old daughter back in 2002. Talked to him in great detail. He's going away for a long time now, but it turns out his son, who's in his early 30s, is in prison right now for assault with intent to commit murder of his girlfriend. So you do see this, and not in every case, and there are children of bad guys who, you know, are marvelous human beings who do very well in life.
Yeah.
But sometimes you see it, yes.
I was wondering how they're going to be able to prove it, and a clear part of it is the witness testimony, is the testimony from the survivors.
I also wonder big picture, and you know about this being a lawyer yourself. It's going to come down to a point where does he take some sort of plea, wrap this up into one hefty sentence and say, okay, enough's enough, and you know the kids go, and I'm going to go do 20 and try to get out, you know, by the time I'm in my 70s.
Well, look, he's actively fighting the lawsuits, and we know lawsuits are very different than charges.
Right. Well, he's throwing money at him, but money's not going to last forever, even if you're
true.
As rich as Diddy.
His legal arguments are good, though. Like
Yeah.
I've looked at some of them, and I've said he actually makes good legal arguments where some of these cases could be tossed. But again, these are the lawsuits, not the charges. So we would see if a deal would be on the table, and he would accept it. But I imagine, you know, one of the things that shocks me about this, and the allegation was from the Rodney Jones lawsuit, his former producer, claims that Diddy has tapes of all
Well,
legal
that's why they went
What did
so
you make
heavy
of
into
that?
the house. I think that's why they went heavy into the house,
Right.
because obviously he kept evidence, voyeuristic evidence, for his own pleasure, or at least that's the allegation. And so if they find any of those things, it's the best evidence you could possibly have. This was taken by the defendant of illegal crimes committed by the defendant, whether it's sexual assault, you know, regular assault, or human trafficking, you know, making somebody do something with somebody else. It's serious.
Why would some? I mean, so maybe it could be.
Well, they want to
voyeurism,
relive
maybe
it. They want to relive
yeah.
it. This is their thing. This is they've done so much in their, you know, perverted life that it escalates into, you know, knowing they can't do this all the time, so they take video of it so they can relive the thrill of having done it the first time.
Yeah.
It's psychotic.
Yeah. So all in all, you believe charges are on the horizon. You believe it's
I
going
don't
to
see how he gets out of this without criminal charges.
Is there any way? I mean,
I mean, this train is down the tracks.
Yeah.
And a fair ways down the tracks. Now,
where does it lead? What are the ripple effects of this being?
Well, I think it's going to make people in that industry look over their shoulders and start thinking, you know, geez, you know, what party was I at? You know, people are going to start distancing themselves from alleged bad actors in this business. And I think it's going to change the culture at some point of how some folks behave.
What a saga.
Oh,
right? My gosh.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And, you know, and when you think about it, Jesse, here's a guy who really had the world by the tail.
Yeah.
I mean, money, influence, creative freedom, kingmaker, prince maker, queen maker, princess maker, and now this. And it looks like he's going to face serious criminal charges, if not go to prison.
So the rumor circulating is that this firm did this because singer and actress Lady Gaga
had threatened to leave the firm unless they parted ways with Combs. This is according to reporting by News Nation. And it's a big deal because the rapper and producer had apparently been with Grubman's firm for over 20 years. He was friends with Alan Grubman by all accounts. And there's more that's happening right now for Diddy, right? We had mentioned that Combs had apparently deleted his entire Instagram account. We did an episode on Sidebar about that. Now it's being reported that he just dropped a $60 million lawsuit that he had been embroiled in litigation for the past 3 years or so with the former owners of his former clothing company, Sean John, for continuing to use his name, image, and likeness after he sold almost his entire stake in the company years ago. But now they seem to have reached an agreement, has dropped the lawsuit. Not sure what the details are of that settlement or if this is in any way connected or affected by the other ongoing legal troubles of Sean Diddy Combs. Because remember, Combs has been hit with multiple lawsuits since November of 2023, alleging sexual assault, sex trafficking, harassment, illegal drug and firearms possession, violence, intimidation. His homes in LA and Miami that were raided by federal agents reportedly pursuant to an ongoing human trafficking investigation by the Southern District of New York. CNN had published a video purportedly of Combs back in 2016 savagely beating his ex-girlfriend Cassandra Ventura in a hotel elevator bank. He had issued an apology on Instagram 2 days after that release. And so all of this has been happening. And then, as we reported too, on Sidebar, he's since deleted all of his Instagram posts, including the apology video. And I want to be clear about something. There's been no arrests that have been made in connection with this investigation. There have been no criminal charges that have been filed. But experts we have spoken to agree that an indictment could be on the horizon. Obviously, we have no way to know for sure, but given what we've seen, at the very least, it shouldn't be surprising if we see this in the near future. But again, we shall see. So what does this all mean now? Well, for that, I want to bring in criminal defense attorney and civil trial lawyer Bradford Cohen, who knows a thing or two about representing celebrities like, look at his roster, Drake, Kodak Black, Lil Wayne. Bradford, so good to see you. Thank you so much for coming back here on Sidebar. I think this is a big deal, right, for a firm to drop a high-powered client like this, because it's not like an agent. Lawyers are supposed to stand up for their clients when they get into legal trouble or accused of wrongdoing.
Yeah, it really is very strange. I mean, I've seen it happen before. It's not reported on, obviously, because it may be that the high-powered individuals that are embroiled in these kind of conflicts where they say, hey, if you represent A, I'm not going to have you continue to represent me. And it's usually very high net worth individuals that might not be newsworthy like this one. But yeah, it's unusual that the move is that she went to them allegedly and said, hey, listen, if you keep representing Sean Combs, then I'm not going to allow you to represent myself. I think it's an unusual move. Now, sometimes it's because of a personal issue that individual may or may not have had with that individual. But if it's just a kind of a question of her own morality or her version of whatever ethical obligation she has to herself and saying like, hey, if you represent me on contracts, then I can't let you represent this other individual that's accused of all these heinous crimes on contracts. I think that in this bubble, it's kind of a stretch. If it was a criminal defendant and, someone said, hey, listen, this person has been brought up on horrible crimes, horrendous facts, and he is now charged with a crime. I don't feel comfortable with a law firm that's going to go forward representing him. If you're also representing me, that would be a little bit more understanding. But as of right now, he is not indicted. He has been accused of a lot of things. Obviously, he's settling out some of these civil cases, which I think is a smart idea. I believe the reason why some of these cases are settling out is probably because it's time for depositions. And certainly in a case where you have a civil case, it gives you leverage when the individual is being prosecuted criminally, because you're asking for a deposition on that civil case where you could explore some of those criminal issues that go to his character or his veracity for truthfulness, things of that nature where you want to avoid being deposed. And I believe that's why that civil case was probably settled. It's probably in a later stage of the civil realm than some of these other cases. Some of these other cases are brand new, so those depositions might not be set. This case, I think, was probably a little bit older, and that's why you're at a stage where depositions would be taken.
Just to read the tea leaves a little bit as well, would I be so far off in saying that you don't want to continue with a massive litigation like that in an effort to save your money and resources because you think you're about to be brought up on criminal charges? That can get expensive to defend it. Is that, am I totally off? And again, we don't know if criminal charges are coming, but am I thinking it the wrong way?
It's not crazy. Civil cases take a long time, right? So civil cases generally take anywhere from 18 to 36 months to really get to the point where you're ready for trial. There's discovery stages, there's motions that are filed, there's objections that are filed. So sometimes, yes, that comes into play. You know, if you have a high-powered civil firm that is billing you a couple $1 million a month, and you can settle something out for 15 million or 20 million, and you know that this may drag on for another year, then it's just a matter of economics. You know, sometimes people get very, very caught up in these civil cases personality wise, where they're just like, I want to spend anything it takes to make sure this individual feels like I'm not going to be taken advantage of. When it comes down to something like economics, yes, you have a point. It could be that, you know, these firms, these very large firms that are charging $2,000, $2,500 an hour, they can bill $500,000, $1 million a month without even blinking an eye. And like I said, if it's, you know, if you think that this is going to go on for another 12, 18 months and you're doing the economics and you can settle something for 20 million bucks, you might want to do that. And especially, like I said, I think also it comes into play that discovery fact that he might have to take the fifth if during a deposition they're asking questions about his veracity for truthfulness or his character. And if you take the fifth, obviously that's not a good look for any kind of motions that they may want to file, a motion for summary judgment or anything like that.
And just to go back, the reason I'm asking this question is because everybody wants to know whether or not Sean Combs is going to be indicted, right? I think that's what a lot of people are wondering, and they're trying to see every single development or legal development or PR development. Does that give them a window into what might be happening or what Combs might know might be happening? And you mentioned something to me, and I thought it was really interesting. The Grubman's firm does civil work, right? They don't do criminal defense work. Diddy hasn't been charged with a crime at this point in time, but I do find it interesting that she just, again, allegedly Lady Gaga went to them and said, either you drop him or I'm leaving. Now, right? So we had all the lawsuits going on. We had the raids going on. We had the Cassandra Ventura video happen. We had the apology video happen. The fact that this is happening now, what does that tell you? Again, assuming this allegation's true that she went to them and they decided to drop him.
It could be coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. I've been saying, you know, the Southern District of New York is a very serious district. My belief is he's going to be indicted before the end of the summer. I've been saying that since the first day of the raid. I think they're just dotting their I's and crossing their T's. And it could be, you know, listen, we could be looking at like maybe Lady Gaga or someone she knows was subpoenaed to be in front of a grand jury. I don't know, you know, and it could be that she started to feel uncomfortable knowing that this thing is moving forward. Who knows? But certainly, I know that Lady Gaga is a individual that looks out for her image very closely. I think that she hires individuals that are the type of individuals that keep their cards close to their chest. She's not out there doing crazy stuff. You don't see pictures of her doing crazy things. I ran across her once at a hotel in New York. She was at the bar at a hotel in New York. She had very, very low key security, not big, gigantic guys that are pushing people out of the way. And in fact, when someone was taking a picture of her at the bar, one of her like low key security guys walked over and said, hey, listen, if you guys delete that photo, we can treat you to the next round. It's really not appropriate, and was totally cool about it. And I think that's the type of individual. I was impressed because a lot of my clients hire those big guys that are like, you know, very aggressive, and she's very low key. So it doesn't surprise me that she would pull this move if she actually did. because I don't think she wants to be associated in any way, shape, or manner with something that may ding her image or ding, the type of reputation she has. And there could be more to it. Like I said, I don't know if she's dealt with him in the past and they wanted to talk to her about something. That who knows?
But this is a big loss, right? Do you know anything about Alan Grubman? Or his firm or his reputation?
I mean, the guy's he's pretty much a legend. Yeah, he's a legend if you're a lawyer that deals with entertainers, and I've been doing this for 27 years, and you don't know who he is, I'd be surprised, because he's represented not only living artists for a long time, he's represented estates of artists in selling
the estate
their
of
catalogs.
David Bowie, I believe, right?
Correct. So he's a well-known guy. And he's got an impeccable reputation. So you'd be hard pressed to find someone who's in this field and deals with entertainers that wouldn't know who he is.
Does that make it difficult for another big powered firm to take up Diddy as a client, even on the civil front, after Grubman's firm dropped him or allegedly dropped him?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I think he'll find new representation. I don't think it's impossible. Certainly, there's always lawyers that are willing to take someone that's willing to pay them. So, whether or not it's going to be a firm that's as high powered as his, I don't know. But there's a lot of excellent attorneys in the entertainment field. I'm very good friends with Theo Settlemeyer, who's another attorney who does, Eminem and 50 Cent. And so, listen, there's different individuals in that field that are excellent, and I think they'll be able to find somebody.
But in that case, he wouldn't be able to represent him because he represents 50 Cent, who has quite an adverse relationship to. But which, by the way, makes me, just to go back from a legal point of view, Grubman's firm, is that a conflict if you have one client who doesn't like your other client? Not that they're necessarily in a legal battle with one another or they have adverse interests, but if one client doesn't like the other client, is that a conflict at all?
It's not a conflict where you have to get off the case. The only time it would be a conflict if they have a direct conflict, right? If they are embroiled in a lawsuit, or if one's suing someone on the other one's team, things of that nature. Listen, it's more of, hey, listen, I don't want to do business with you guys if you're doing business with this person. And listen, when you're doing, like me, I represent a lot of individuals that are in the rap business. And you know how there's always these rap beefs. So I always have to check who has a beef with who before I pick up a new case, because sometimes my old clients might have a problem with my new clients. And I always check with them first because, like I said, I have a very good relationship. I've been representing some of my clients for 10 or 15 years. So I always try to, gauge that. And I've turned people down because of those type of perceived conflicts. And it's not an ethical responsibility for me to do because there's no direct conflict, but certainly for me, a moral responsibility to my clients, I would do that.
While I have you, before I let you go, I talked about this on an earlier sidebar. I want your perspective. Diddy's Instagram, and we did a whole sidebar on this, has been used by him or whoever operates his account a lot during the course of these legal developments. And, I mentioned it before, using it as a way to apologize for the Cassandra Ventura hotel videotape. The fact that his entire Instagram account has been wiped clean, there are no more posts, including that video. We talked about that. I'm curious your perspective, and I'll tell you, Stephen A. Smith from ESPN, he said you delete all the videos from your Instagram account, including the one I just showed. If you had 1 million photos, if you had 1 million videos, and you decided to delete 999,999, that's the one you should have kept up if you're sincere, meaning the apology one. And I know that you've been taking a lot of hits, and there's been shrapnels of criticism all over the place aimed in your direction. Not that it wasn't deserved, although one could argue the ex that you hit had to deal with a hell of a lot more than you had to deal with in terms of the criticism. And then he goes, delete everything else, not that. Don't you want people to know that you were contrite, that you were incredibly sorry, that you have profound regret for the egregious actions that you were caught on camera committing? What's your take on deleting everything from his Instagram account?
I think that I think the apology wasn't taken the way that he thought it would be taken, number one. I don't believe it got him where he thought it would get him in terms of, and I don't know. My opinion is it was probably a crisis PR saying like, hey, you got to get something out, because I don't believe it would be, I wouldn't give the advice as a defense attorney, hey, start apologizing right away on your Instagram.
And admitting it was you on the tape.
Yeah. I would probably have, I always suggest the low key is the best way, and deleting pretty much everything. That the advice, the fact that he deleted everything, that could probably be advice from his defense attorney. The issue of him putting up the apology in the first place was probably some sort of crisis PR person. I don't think that it got the type of traction that he thought it would. Most people thought that he wasn't sincere, or now he's sorry and he wasn't sorry. He shouldn't have been sorry, or that I was in a dark place and now I'm not. I think a better move for him would have been the route to take to a AANA or some sort of retreat for like 6 months and get some treatment for whatever psychological issues and or addiction issues he may or may not have, or it may be that he had and now he doesn't, but it's never too late for a tune-up. Those type of things are probably a better idea. And as part and parcel of that, usually you'll find that recovery centers will say, like, get rid of your Instagram, get rid of your past, so people aren't commenting on it, and you're taking that in psychologically, where people are writing like, hey, you're still a POS, you're the worst person on the planet. And listen, everyone's a human. We lose our humanity on the internet somehow, where people think it's okay to start commenting on other people. And even if that person, is not a good person, and I'm not saying he's a good person, a bad person. I don't know him at all. But I'm certainly sure the actions that he took that day was not that of someone who was in their right mind. I think that, people have to remember that. And during those recovery periods, that's a good time to delete your Instagram, delete your posts, and have no one comment on it.
See, now that's interesting, because I thought that he might have wanted to turn off the comments and not have his family see what people were responding on every comment, although he still kept his X account where there's some of that same content up there. But anyway, you just real quick before we close things up, you had mentioned he might have gotten advice from his criminal defense attorney to delete it. I'm confused, because that's already all out there. I mean, like, that was all taken away. It's not like he can hide it. It's not. And by the way, and let's say, for example, we lived in a world where you delete your Instagram and it's totally gone. That'd be like evidence tampering. So what would be the legal advice for him to delete everything?
I think because, like I said before, whenever I get a defendant, I'm like, listen, start fresh, get rid of all that stuff, because people are putting up comments that you're then going to want to respond to, that you may put out something new. It's always a good idea just to delete all of your social accounts and start fresh, so that you're not wanting to respond to individuals. You're not wanting to put something else up. You're not wanting to do these things. And also, like I said, it's affecting you psychologically. So I always say that, and it's not destroying evidence or anything like that, because they have a copy of it. It's not like it's still in the ether somewhere. It's just that no one is able to get to you to make comments, for you to make a comment back, and then they can use that comment against you. And it's just one of those things that I think add to the distractions of a case. And you don't need any distractions. Our job as defense attorneys are difficult as they are. And I don't like to make my job more difficult with my client having an Instagram, a Twitter, all these other things that they feel like at 12 o'clock at night they need to go on and start talking about things.
Yeah, what a better world if we didn't have that stuff going on. Bradford Cohen, good seeing you. Thank you so much for coming on, sir.
Thanks, man.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.